Good day everyone, my name is Danica G. Cahipo and we will be your reporter for Chapter 4 entitled Assessing Student Learning Outcomes, and I will be your reporter for Lesson 1 and 2. So, outcome assessment is a process of gathering information on whether the instruction, services, activities that the program provides is producing the desired students' learning outcomes. So for Lesson 1, I'm going to tackle about the principles of good practices in assessing learning outcomes. So number one is the assessment of student learning starts with the institution vision, mission, and core values. There should be a clear statement on the kinds of learning that the institution values most for its students. So, napaka-importante talaga na sa isang institusyon na magkaroon ng malinaw na mission and core values. For us to be able to align everyone in the organization and ensure that everyone is working towards a single core course. It also helps us to increase efficiency and productivity in the organization. Number 2, assessment works best when the program has a clear statement of objectives aligned with the institutional vision, mission, and core values, such as alignment ensures clear, shared, and implementable objectives. So assessment is a goal-oriented process. Assessment should reveal how well students have learned at kung paano mo sila gustong matuto, while instruction ensures that they learn it from this offer. Assessment learning objectives need to be closely aligned to the mission and core values so that they reinforce one another. Clear, shared, implementable goals are the cornerstone for assessment that is focused and useful. Number 3, outcome-based assessment focuses on the students' activities that will still be relevant after formal schooling concludes. The approach is to design assessment activities which are observable and less abstract, such as to determine the student's ability to write a paragraph, which is more observable than to determine the student's verbal ability. So pag sinabi natin outcome-based assessment, it is a deliberation collection of evidence of students learning based on outcomes it's yield is marked correlative to the outcomes rather than other students. It is also relevant after school ends or after visually shown. To be able to do that, you need to design your assessment activities that are observable and less abstract. Number 4, assessment requires attention not only to outcomes but also and equally to the activities and experience that lead to attainment of learning outcomes. These are supporting students' activities. So assessment requires attention to outcomes but also equally to the experience that lead those outcomes. Information about that outcomes is high importance. Where students end up matters greatly, but to improve outcomes, you need to know about students' experience along the way, about the curriculum teaching and kind of students' effort that lead to a particular outcomes. Ang assessment rin ay makakatulong sa atin to understand which students learn best under what conditions, which such knowledge comes to capacity to improve the whole of their learning. Number 5, assessment works best when it continues, ongoing, and not episodic. Assessment should be cumulative because improvement is best achieved through a linked series of activities than over time in an instructional cycle. So, ang assessment ay gagana ng mabuti kung ito ay ongoing at hindi episodic. Assessment is a process whose power is cumulative through isolated one-shot. Assessment can be better than non-improvement over time is best fostered when assessment entails a link, a series of cohorts of students. It may mean collecting the examples of students' performance or using the same instruments semester after semester. The point is to monitor progress toward the intended goals in a spirit of continuous improvement along the way. The assessment process itself should be evaluated and refrain in the light emerging insights. Number 6. Begin assessment B specifying clearly and exactly what you want to assess. What you want to assess is are stated in your learning outcomes or lesson objectives. Importante sa atin na malaman kung ano ang iyong assessment, kung ano ang gusto mong assessment. And it must be stated in your lesson objectives or outcomes. Number 7. The intended learning outcome, lesson, objectives, not content, is the basis of assessment task. You use content in the development of the assessment tool and task, but it is the attainment of your learning outcome, not content, that you want to assess. This is outcome-based teaching and learning. So, pag sinabi natin outcome-based teaching and learning, it is a curriculum design framework to teaching and learning that help you to focus. It's first, an important step is to identify the intended outcome or goals of a module or program, and then aligning teaching, learning, and assessment to maximize the likelihood that students achieve those outcomes or goals. Number 8. Set your criterion of success or acceptable standards of success. It is against the established standard that you will interpret your assessment result. So a criterion of success is a list of features that the teacher wants the children to include their work during the course of a lesson. It is a really good way of making children aware what is expected to them and can also encourage them to extend themselves during this course of the lesson. For example, with a score of 7 out of 10, the highest possible score acceptable or considered success. Number 9. Make use of varied tools for assessment data gathering and multiple sources of assessment data. It is not pedagogically sound to rely on just one source of data gathering by only one assessment tool. Consider multiple intelligence and learning styles. DepEd Order number 73 as 2012 cites the use of multiple measures as one assessment guideline. Some examples of varied tools in assessing you can use are: the discussion is a teacher-centered but also learned-centered. The teacher can use the oral recitation to get the attentions of the students. Second is you can make the paper in the pencil test and activities in the books for the learning assessment. This kind of assessment are considering the multiple intelligence, which is linguistic intelligence. Number 10. Learners must be given feedback about their performance. Feedback must be specific, like good work. It is a positive feedback and is welcome, but actually it is not very good feedback since it is not specific. A more specific feedback is you deserve rules on subject-verb agreement and variety sentence 3 of your commas were misplaced. So as a future teacher, we should also know how to give feedback, a good feedback when they are answering. Para naman maging motivated sila at saka mag-speak up sila, mag-cooperate sa mga discussions natin. Number 11. Assessment should be in a real-world application and not an out-of-context drills. So, itong principle na ito ay ginagawa ng mga guro by sharing their experience. For example, one of your teachers shared her favorite pastry shop. Paano nga ba ina-advertise yung pastry shop na iyon sa mga tao? At saka, when she is saying the brand names of the product. Number 12. Emphasize the assessment of higher order thinking. This is done when the teacher introduced to students the topic about making a research paper, and she left them to have brainstorming about the research paper that they will be making. So, second example. So, yung teacher nyo, binigyan kayo ng pagkakataon na mag-share ng ideas and explanation kung ano at saka kung ano ang tutunan nyo doon sa lesson. Number 13. Provide opportunities for self-assessment. Lesson 2. Samples of supporting students' activities. So, students' learning outcome number 1, a student can organize information from secondary sources as basis of research. Student supporting activities 1.1, practice differentiating source materials and one's opinions. 1.2, reading articles and formulating original paragraphs from quotes, paraphrase, and summaries. Supporting students activities 1.3, writing of essays to develop topic. Supporting students activities 1.4, integrating bibliographic entries of appropriate format. Student learning outcome number 2. Students apply principles of logical thinking and persuasive argument in writing. So, supporting students activities 2.1 is forming opinion about the topic. Supporting students activities 2.2, researching and writing about a variety of perspectives. Supporting students activities 2.3, adapting styles to the identified audience. And supporting students activities 2.4, employing clear argument and writing. So, students learning outcomes number 3. Students write multiple page essays complying with standards, formats, and style. So, supporting students' activities 3.1, analyzing and evaluating text. Supporting students' activities 3.2, writing about a variety of perspective on single topic. Supporting students' activities 3.3, adapting tone and styles to address one's audience. Supporting students' activities 3.4, reviewing grammar and essay format and readings. And lastly, supporting students' activities 3.5, holding group discussion about various topics.
Good day everyone, I'm Kabugawan John Raymond from BEd Tutu. Today, I'll be discussing Lesson 3, which is Phases of Outcome Assessment in the Instructional Cycle. Before I discuss about outcome assessment phases in the instructional cycle, let's understand first what assessment is. In your idea, what is assessment? In education, the term assessment refers to the wide variety of methods or tools that educators use to evaluate, measure, and document the academic readiness, learning progress, skill acquisition, or educational needs of students. So here is the outcome assessment phases in the instructional cycle. Phase 1, institutional mission. So what is institutional mission? Institutional mission statements provide various constituencies, students, faculty, legislators, etc. with the institution's educational goals and guidance concerning the achievement of these goals. For example, the DepEd mission, to protect and promote the right of every Filipino to quality, equitable, culture-based and complete basic education, where students learn in a child-friendly, gender-sensitive, safe, and motivating environment. Teachers facilitate learning and constantly nurture every learner. Administrators and staff, as stewards of the institution, ensure an enabling and supportive environment for effective learning to happen. Family, community, and other stakeholders are actively engaged and share responsibility for developing lifelong learners. Phase 2, which is program goals. So, what is program goals? Program goals are broad statements of the kinds of learning we hope students will achieve. They describe learning outcomes and concepts, or what you want students to learn. In general terms, it is clear communication, problem solving skills, etc. For example, the goal: students will develop positive cross-cultural attitudes. So the objectives: by grades 4 to 6, students will demonstrate positive cross-cultural attitudes as indicated by agreement with cultural items on the cross-cultural attitudes scale. This scale ranges from strongly disagree to strongly agree. See what data to collect for various attitude scales. Phase 3, Subject Objectives. Subject objectives are brief statements that describe what students will be expected to learn by the end of the school year: course, unit, lesson, project, or class period. For example, this course is designed to prepare you for professional writing experience. By the end of the course, you should be able to identify the primary and secondary audience of a text, craft texts which take in consideration the needs of your primary audience, write in an array of genres of a variety of purposes, identify different rhetorical strategies and appeals in the writing of others, use various rhetorical strategies and appeals to make arguments in your own writing, appreciate the requirements and limitations placed on different types of writing by their unique rhetorical situations, craft texts which consider the requirements and limitations of their unique rhetorical situations. Phase 4, Desired Student Learning Outcomes. So, learning outcomes are statements that describe significant and essential learning that learners have achieved and can reliably demonstrate at the end of a course or program. In other words, learning outcomes identify what the learner will know and be able to do by the end of a course or program. For example, the learner will have demonstrated the ability to make engine repairs on a variety of automobiles. In the above statement, the ability to make engine repairs implies that the person has requisite knowledge to do so. Phase 5, Diagnostic Assessment. So, diagnostic assessment is a type of assessment which examines what students knows and can do prior to a learning program being implemented. Assessment of a student's skills and knowledge upon entry to the program provides a baseline against which to assess progress. For example, baseline test, journal, performance task, and word splash. Phase 6, Deciding on Lesson Focus. The first phase of a gradual release of a responsibility model is the focus lesson. This is the time when the teacher is demonstrating, modeling, and sharing his or her thinking with students. Although this segment may be brief, or 5 to 15 minutes, it is powerful. Phase 7, Supporting Students' Activities. Students apply principles of logical thinking and persuasive argument in writing. First, forming opinion about the topic. Second, researching and writing about a variety of perspectives. Third, adapting style to identified audience. And fourth, employing clear argument in writing. Phase 8, Formative Assessment Outcomes. So, formative assessment refers to a wide variety of methods that teachers use to conduct and process evaluations of students' comprehensions, learning needs, and academic progress during a lesson, unit, or course. For example, metacognition table. At the end of a class, each student answers the following questions presented to them on index cards. What did we do in a class? Why did we do it? What did I learn today? How can I apply it? And what questions do I have about it? Phase 9. Review or retouch. Examine or assess or something formally with the possibility or intention of instituting change of if necessary. Phase 10. Mastery learning. So, mastery learning is a method of instructional where the focus is on the role of feedback in learning. Furthermore, mastery learning refers to a category of instructional methods which establishes a level of performance that all students must master before moving on to the next unit. Phase 11. Summative assessment of outcomes. So, summative assessment or summative evaluation refers to the assessment of participants where the focus is on the outcome of a program. This contrasts with formative assessment which summarizes the participants' development at a particular time. For example, essay, report, portfolio, dissertation, and presentation.
Good day everyone, my name is Gilbert P. Kabugawan from BEd 2, Section 2.
On this video, I will explain what constructive alignment is. Before we define constructive alignment, understand first what learning is. Learning is a process of constructive, meaning this understanding is difference. This theory is the idea that knowing how one wants to know is by meaning, making and constructing reality through activities and experience. Hence, learning is an active behavior. This means that the role of the teacher is not to impact or transmit knowledge, but the catalyst would decide learning opportunities. Now, let's talk about the constructive alignment. Constructive alignment is a model proposed by Biggs. This video can be applied when designing a program or a subject or a lesson. The term alignment here is what a teacher does. Learning outcomes is about in a way we need to declare and communicate what we want our students to learn. We can read the domains of learning to understand more about the different areas. When writing learning outcomes, we need to be clear about the levels of learning we want our student to achieve. Assessment, we need to determine how the outcomes will be accessed before we determine the kind of activities to help student achieve these outcomes, although assessment are usually at the end of the learning sequence. Learning activities, in choosing learning activities, make sure to give students opportunities to engage on the process rather than passively listening. It is important to consider the type and suitable of the activities as we need to ensure that the activities that will deserve the student as well as the intended outcomes. The reason why constructive alignment is important that it is used for curriculum development and lesson planning. These models suppose the principles of assessment to ensure effective outcome based learning to learn more constructive alignment.
Next is Lesson 5 entitled Variety of Assessment Methods, Tools, and Tasks. There are two classifications of assessment methods. the traditional and authentic. Let us define first what is traditional assessment methods. It refers to the usual paper and pencil. Authentic assessment refers to non-paper and pencil test, also called alternative assessment. Here are the two groups of written tests that includes the basic examples. First is the selected response. Ang mga halimbawa ng selected response type of test ay ang alternate response, which is the true or false and yes or no, the matching type, and the multiple choice type. Second is the constructed response. Ang mga halimbawa ng constructed response type of test are the completion type, which is the fill in the blanks. Next is the short answer and the essay test and problem solving. Examples of authentic assessment tools are the demonstration of what have been learned by either a product or a performance. In product, it includes product output, visual graph, collage, and reflective journal. While in the performance, it includes performance tasks, experiments, oral presentation, and dramatization. First is the product. Halimbawa ng product are the reports, papers, research projects, and reviews. Next is the performance. Halimbawa ng performance test are executing steps of tango, delivering a keynote speech, opening a computer, and demonstration teaching. Next is Lesson 6 entitled Portfolio. Let us define first what is a portfolio. So, a portfolio is a purposeful collection of a student's work or documented performance that tells the story of the student's achievement or growth. For example, video of dance, pictures of the child in the classroom, and tests of the students that has completed. There are types of portfolio. Portfolios can be classified either as working portfolios, display portfolios, or assessment portfolios. First is working or development portfolio. It contains work in progress as well as finished work products that show individuals' development and growth over time. Examples of work products include student essays, artworks, lab reports, or reading logs. Second is display, showcase, or best work portfolios. It is designed to display a learner's best quality of work. It demonstrates the highest level of achievement attained by the student. Last is the assessment or evaluation portfolio. It is the evaluation of prior learning through the development of what a student has learned, and it is a technique by which a student achievement can be measured.
Good day, everyone. I am Charlene Nakabe from BE Ed 2 Section 2. I have 3 lessons to discuss in this chapter. That is the last 3 lessons, so please bear with me. Let's start with Lesson 7, the scoring rubrics. So what is the scoring rubric? A rubric is a coherent set of criteria for students' work that includes descriptions of level of performance, quality on the criteria. So a rubric is a scoring tool that explicitly represents the performance expectations for an assignment or piece of work. It is an efficient tool that allows you to objectively measure student performance on an assessment activity. The main purpose of rubrics is to assess performance made evident in processes and products. It can serve as a scoring guide that seeks to evaluate the student's performance and many different tasks based on a full range of criteria rather than a single numerical score. And rubrics are both beneficial for teachers and students. For students, it allows them to evaluate his or her work before submitting. He has the chance to check the criteria for that certain performance to satisfy himself for the grades he will get. For the teachers, it will help them justify the given grades based on the rubric. For example, there are students who are sometimes complaining for their score or grades. Through rubrics, The teacher will have the proof that his student's grade suits his effort for that performance. Sasabihin ng teacher na you are guided with the criteria, therefore you know to yourself the efforts you only gave, like that. So we have two major parts of a rubric. First is the coherent set of criteria and the description of levels of performance for these criteria. So this is the coherent sets of criteria, the depth and quality of ideas, variety of sources, and so on. While this part is the description or indicators of these criteria. And in the upper corner, this is what we call the rating scale. For example, this one, very creative, ordinary or routine, and imitative. Now let's move on to the two types of rubrics. First is analytic and second is holistic. In analytic rubric, each criterion is evaluated separately. In a holistic rubric, all criteria are evaluated simultaneously. So this is an example of analytic rubric for creativity. And this one is an example of holistic rubric for creativity. And if you notice, in holistic rubric, the rating scale were removed. In holistic rubric, scoring is faster than with analytic rubric. It is good for summative assessment. We also have other examples of scoring rubrics. I guess this is what they call the checklist, where it allows teachers and students to gather information and to make judgments about what students know and can do in relation to the outcomes. Checklists tend to be longer than other types of rubrics since each aspect of performance you are looking for in students' work or performances essentially becomes its own criterion. Now let's move on to the next lesson, the assessment strategies and multiple intelligences. Learners have multiple intelligences and varied learning styles. Students must be given the opportunity to demonstrate learning that is aligned to their multiple intelligences and to their learning styles. It is good for teachers to consider the multiple intelligences of learners to enable learners to demonstrate learning in a manner which makes them comfortable and successful. Teachers truly consider learners' multiple intelligences when they make use of a variety of assessment tools and tasks. So we have 8 multiple intelligences. First is naturalistic, linguistic, visual spatial, kinesthetic, musical, logical, intrapersonal, and interpersonal. Naturalistic intelligence involves expertise in the recognition and classification of the numerous pieces of his or her environment. People with naturalistic intelligence, such as Charles Darwin, have an ability to identify and distinguish among different types of plants, animals, and weather formations that are found in the natural world. Linguistic deals with sensitivity to the spoken and written language, ability to learn languages, and capacity to use language to accomplish certain goals. People with linguistic intelligence, such as William Shakespeare, have an ability to analyze information and create products involving oral and written language, such as speeches, books, and memos. Spatial intelligence features the potential to recognize and manipulate the patterns of wide space as well as the patterns of more confined areas, such as those of importance to sculptors, surgeons, chess players, graphic artists, or architects. People with spatial intelligence, such as Frank Lloyd Wright, have an ability to recognize and manipulate large-scale and fine-grained spatial images. Bodily kinesthetic intelligence is the potential of using one's whole body or parts of the body, like the hand or the mouth, to solve problems or to fashion products. People with bodily kinesthetic intelligence, such as Michael Jordan, have an ability to use one's own body to create products, perform skills, or solve problems through mind-body union. Musical intelligence refers to the skill in the performance, composition, and appreciation of musical patterns. People with musical intelligence, such as Ed Sheeran have an ability to recognize and create musical pitch, rhythm, and tone. Logical mathematical intelligence refers to the capacity to analyze problems logically, carry out mathematical operations, and investigate issues scientifically. People with logical mathematical intelligence, such as Albert Einstein, have an ability to develop equations and proofs, make calculations, and solve abstract problems. Intrapersonal intelligence is the capacity to understand oneself, to have an effective working model of oneself including one's desires, fears, and capacities, and to use such information effectively in regulating one's own life. People with intrapersonal intelligence, such as Aristotle, have an ability to recognize and understand his or her own moods, desires, motivations, and intentions. This type of intelligence can help a person to understand which life goals are important and how to achieve them. Interpersonal intelligence is the capacity to understand the intentions, motivations, and desires of other people and consequently to work effectively with others. People with interpersonal intelligence, such as Mother Teresa, have an ability to recognize and understand other people's moods, desires, motivations, and intentions. And finally, the last lesson for this chapter, the assessment of learning outcomes in the K-12 program. The assessment process is holistic with emphasis on the formative or developmental purpose of quality assuring student learning. It is also standard-based as it seeks to ensure that teachers will teach to the standards and students will aim to meet or even to exceed the standards. So here are assessment practices lifted from DepEd Order 8, 2015 for the guidelines of all teachers. Number 1, teachers should employ assessment methods that are consistent with standards. This means that assessment as a process must be based on standards and competencies that are stated in the K-12 curriculum guide. Assessment must be based not on content but on standards and competencies. Therefore, there must be alignment between assessment tools or tasks and standard and competencies. Second, teachers must employ both formative and summative assessment, both individually and collaboratively. Assessment is done primarily to ensure learning. Thus, teachers are expected to assess learning in every stage of lesson development, beginning, middle, and at the end. Third, grades are a function of written work, performance tasks, and quarterly tests. This means that grades come from multiple sources with emphasis on performance tasks from grade 1 to 12, and grade does not come from only one source, rather from multiple sources. Last is the cognitive process dimensions given by Rathwohl and Anderson 2001. From remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating governs formulation of assessment tasks. Assessments can be an important tool to help both students and teachers to gauge the learning process, identify the gaps in understanding, and work both individually and also through collaboration to bridge those gaps to ensure an effective and complete learning experience.